perhaps this is a topic that maybe isn't given complete amount of time. And so I think today, with Mayor Michael Wiles speaking to us, he can give us more insight into this very important topic, because I was in one history class last week in which the instructor, Ms. Toro, was talking about how some of the things that we thought were beyond us, like hate and intolerance, unfortunately is resurfacing in our society, in our country. And that's too bad. So we have to be on high alert and do everything we can to make sure that doesn't continue. So it is very good that we have Michael J. Wiles, Mayor of Englewood, here today to speak to us. Before I introduce him, though, I want to introduce our Mayor, Christopher Chung, who's present. Our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Cirillo. And our Board of Education President, Tom Matarazzo. Thank you for coming. Now, Mayor Wiles has had an extensive career. He is a two-term city council member. He's a three-term mayor. He's a former federal prosecutor. He is currently immigration attorney at Wiles and Weinberg. It was a firm started by his dad, Leon Wiles, who represented John Lennon from the Beatles fame and Yoko Ono. He's an author of Safe Haven in America and Battles to Open the Golden Door. He has testified before Congress, and often he is seen on national TV and radio debating immigration issues. So we are very pleased and thankful to have Michael J. Wiles here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Chung, for your graciousness and invitation to address the student body today. Dr. Cirillo, Mr. Donahue, Principal Donahue, and Dr. Matarazzo from the school board, thank you for your stewardship and leadership. How many people here have a relative or know somebody who lost a relative in the Holocaust? Okay. Out of a room of about 200 people, we have 4 people. This is why I'm here. The state of New Jersey now mandates that everybody be taught, this is Governor McGreevey who put it in, that they learn about the Holocaust. Some of us learned very differently in our households. Others will be learning through books and lectures, and it's my privilege actually to dedicate my words today in the memory of my mother, Ruth Wiles, and my grandparents, Max and Hilda Schoenwalter. And I figured I'd start it by just introducing you a little to them. This is my mom. She passed away here in the United States. She was 56 years old, and she was a little baby when Adolf Hitler decided that she needed to have a J on her passport. She came to the United States when she was 1. Thank God she lived successfully, sadly passed away from breast cancer. But just in case she would take the J off of her passport for the word Jew, they put the name Sarah before and after her name. My grandmother, the same. My great-grandparents, the same. You'll see a swastika, you're welcome to come forward later, and you'll see the J for Jew. This was a letter that my grandfather Max was given when Adolf Hitler took his business from him. It was a Lackfarbrenk, which is a paint company. And the person who took the business from my grandfather away sent this letter and said, "We're Judenrein, we got rid of the Jews. Please use us Heil Hitler Schoenwalter and Company." My grandfather's name was Max Schoenwalter. Later, when he resettled, thank God, in the United States, these beautiful golden doors were open to him. He started another paint company called Shekel and Paint Company, and he talks in this letter of the letter that he had in his custody that kept the name Schoenwalter and Company, the Jewish name, because of the trust that Scandinavian and German companies had in his work, but said that we were Judenrein, we got rid of the Jew. This is his business card in Germany. This is his business card in the United States. He passed away 6 weeks after I was born. This gold sign in Hebrew is Mizrach. In Hebrew, that means east. Jew prays 3 times a day, presumably, and faces Jerusalem east. This little metal sign was in my grandparents' and my great-grandparents' home on the eastern wall. And I'm proud to say I said my prayers this morning before I came here, my children, and we all prayed towards Jerusalem. That sign, this painting, is in my home, in my office, in my law firm, where I help people come to America, and it's also at City Hall. And I remind myself of the journey that I took and the privilege that I have to live in this wonderful country. Today we're going to give a brief description on the Holocaust, how it happened, the important history that it is to know and to learn the lessons of never again. The Holocaust refers to the murder of 6 million Jews slaughtered by Germany while under Nazi rule during World War II, along with the murder of millions of more homosexuals, gypsies, blacks, handicapped people, and others. The atrocities were committed in the cruelest, most unimaginable way, and I'm not going to spare you some of the details later because you're old enough before you embark and you graduate to know a little bit of what happened behind you in your rearview mirror. The Nazi Party was headed by Adolf Hitler, who rose to power starting in the early 1930s. Over the course of time, as a Führer, as a dictator, he implemented increasingly racist laws against non-Aryan groups. He didn't start off as a dictator. When he rose in Germany, it was a democracy, and it was by breaking law and targeting his critics that he was able to consolidate his power. People became fearful to speak out out of fear and respect for the laws, even by their own leaders. We, as a result of these little lessons, need to make sure that we respect the opposition views and never incite danger. Letting a little air out of the tire when somebody has a disagreement creates, believe it or not, harmony. The implementation of racist campaign began with boycotts of Jewish businesses and quickly progressed to banning Jews from many professions, prohibiting from owning businesses. My own grandfather, Max Schoenwalter, who lived in Germany, received this letter from the Nazi regime informing him that we're now Jew-free in 1938. He escaped in 1939 to a little country called Liechtenstein and then made his way to the United States. The policies then led to what's called Kristallnacht in 1938, during which dozens of Jews were murdered and Jewish synagogues, buildings, and businesses were smashed and burned. Kristallnacht, Night of Glass, translated in such a way so named because of the massive destruction that it involved. Nazi Germany under Hitler was responsible for starting World War II. Germany annexed Czechoslovakia in 1938, invaded Poland the next year, and the war began in earnest. Through strategic alliances and increased military strength, Germany was able to obtain much control of Europe. For a long time, it seemed that Germany and its neighboring Axis powers, mainly Italy and Japan, would end up winning the war and controlling much of the world. Many errors, such as reneging on a treaty with the Soviet Union and Japan's bombing of Pearl Harbor, helped drive the reluctant United States eventually into this massive war, costing the Axis powers its victory. The Allied powers, including the United States, the Soviet Union, England, France, eventually began and defeated the Axis powers and put Hitler down. By the time the World War II began, most German Jews had fled the country. Some wonder why any remained. 90% of the Jews in Hungary, Poland, and Romania were slaughtered in gas chambers, and their bodies burned. My wife and I, my wife Amy is here holding the video for me, and I'm so appreciative that she came. Spent a summer, 2 summers ago in Poland, actually walking into these concentration camps. The story of the ship of the St. Louis illustrates why many Jews didn't even have a choice. They weren't wanted anywhere. The St. Louis was a ship that departed Germany with over 900 Jewish refugees seeking to escape Nazi persecution. The governments of Cuba, the United States, and Canada all refused to accept these passengers, other than a select few who were fortunate enough to have U.S. citizenship. The ship was forced to return to Europe, where many of the passengers were eventually killed by the Nazis. It undoubtedly in line with what the American immigration policy unfortunately was at the time, and as much as possible, the number of Jews permitted into the United States was very small. The intentional stonewalling of Jewish immigration by the U.S. government prevented the escape from unnecessary death of scores of hundreds of thousands from the Nazis. Today, I work as an immigration lawyer, and part of my job is to prevent this legacy from continuing. When the president puts every obstacle in front of people trying to come from Muslim immigrants from war-torn or authoritarian countries, I take those cases and I see that justice is being done because of where I came from. America has to continue to be a safe haven. Our doors, not a wall, our doors need to remain on a hinge so that we can shut it when we're in harm's way and open it to give God's mercy. As Germany invaded other countries, it imposed its beliefs on conquered lands. It established the most efficient and ruthless genocide campaign in history. The final solution is what Adolf Hitler masterminded. It was implemented in order to once and for all murder every Jew found in Europe. First, the Nazis would segregate Jews and undesirables in ghettos. From there, they would be transported to concentration camps or extermination camps. You can see the cattle cars. People died on the journey. There's one now in Manhattan by the Museum of the Holocaust Museum downtown. From there, they would be transported to concentration or extermination camps. Men would handle hard labor, were generally placed into one camp, and they would work to support the Nazi war effort while being starvation rations. Women, children, elderly, and sick people were placed in another camp and quickly murdered in gas chambers when they were gassed to death by the thousands. 20,000 people a day gassed, murdered, and burned. All about 2/3 of the pre-war European Jewry were killed. 2/3. The Nazis committed other atrocities as well, such as the most extreme forms of torture, some ostensibly in the name of medical science, and the violent murders of infants and children in their own parents' eyes. Although the Nazis lost the war, Hitler's legacy still lives today with white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and we must, young ladies and gentlemen, stand up and denounce these groups that prevent their rise again. If our president won't speak out against white supremacists driving into a crowd of protesters in Charlottesville, you must. I must. In immigration law, having anticipated the Nazi persecutions, it's still a theoretical ground of inadmissibility to the United States. We don't let Nazis immigrate to our country, and we must also speak out so that we don't allow homegrown fascism to flourish. The story of Hitler's rise and how the world allowed the Holocaust to happen is a long one. It wouldn't be possible to cover it in such a short speech, but that should not prevent us from internalizing some of these lessons. We are obligated to stand up against hatred, racism, and xenophobia against any group. We must accept each other in spite of our differences and be prepared to fight injustice anywhere in the world, and particularly in the United States. We must also accept those that are escaping persecution and provide a safe haven in the United States. Imagine this. First, they would start by deporting Jews from Germany. But when they realized that nobody wanted them in Europe and the United States, they had no choice. So they began shooting them. The last visit that my wife and I had in Poland exhausted us emotionally. They took us to a wooded area. You look at these magnificent trees. The city of Englewood, where I had the privilege of being the mayor, is a city of trees, the word Englewood. And there was a massive grave of hundreds of children. They literally bussed children as if you were in a school and went into the back of a bus, brought to the middle of a place with big pits, and they shot them right in their place and buried them massively. The shooting and the digging took time. It smelled. It wasn't hygienic for the Nazis, and they didn't think it was good for morale. So they built concentration camps and then found a gas called Zyklon B. And you can see this if you travel to Poland, Germany, and so forth. And and they began to gas people, bringing them into these massive rooms, and then taking the bodies out and literally burning them. The Germans were efficient, children. 200 here in this room. The lessons of the Holocaust are those of tolerance, reminding ourselves, no matter what your faith, if you pray on a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday, that we're all made in God's image, and that we need to pay this forward. There were uprisings. The Warsaw Ghetto was the longest, where they held out against the Nazis, giving them a hard time. But they literally slaughtered so many people, so many days. This is the blessings of the internet. Would you imagine that this could ever happen in today's day with social media? There isn't anything that happens within a few block radius of where you live that can't be captured. Imagine if we had that now. The scholarship to this day on why America didn't get in sooner and that America could have prevented more deaths is being confirmed. President Roosevelt at the time directed the military not to destroy the railroad tracks where they were bringing hundreds of thousands of Jews, even while the Americans were in Europe, because they needed to target rubber plants, factories, and divert planes for military targets. Other than slavery, this is one of the greatest stains on American history. That and the Japanese internment. That the President of the United States was given factual information that Jews were being slaughtered and he didn't take out the railroad tracks is just unconscionable and unacceptable. FDR, who was the president at the time, was a virtual deity beloved by everybody, but this was unforgivable. The most notorious Holocaust victim was Anne Frank, who some of you may have read her book, where she lived in an attic. And the most notorious survivor was Elie Wiesel, and I recommend that you read his book, Night, where he painfully goes through the experience. Again, 90% of Polish, Hungarian, Romanian Jews were all slaughtered. And we have the stories of righteous Gentiles, non-Jews, who gave safety to people in their farms, and we have the privilege of meeting them. And each year, the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in the state of Israel rewards and recognizes this extraordinary stewardship and citizenship of the world. Don't kid yourselves. There was great sympathy right after the Holocaust for the state of Israel to be created. But it wasn't just the creation of the state of Israel that gave Jews the world over a military, a sense of honor, and a place where they could pray to the eastern wall of their home. It was the years, thousands of years of millennia where Jews were trying to return to their homeland. I heard an ambassador speak yesterday, and we could all debate the Palestinian cause, but his parents traced their roots to the state of Israel in the 1800s. The state of Israel was in the makings in the early 1900s, and thank God it came to full fruition. Protecting, preventing, and deterring a Holocaust is what we as citizens of the world, no matter what faith we have, must work towards. My father, as you heard, represented John Lennon from the Beatles and started a beautiful law firm. And there was a famous case that he had. He represented a gentleman who was working for a bank called Deutsche Bank. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a big German bank, a national bank. And one of its leaders at the time was the son of Mr. von Ribbentrop. Mr. von Ribbentrop was Hitler's Secretary of State, who I believe was killed at Nuremberg when there were trials after, and they brought a lot of these individuals to justice. There was a Jewish woman in our office who refused to go with Mr. von Ribbentrop's son to get his green card. And my father went. And my father sat across from a World War II veteran who was the examiner doing the interview. And it said on the forms, "Were you a Nazi?" And he was. His father was hung because of his crimes against humanity. My father said the only thing that made him uncomfortable was when he came into the room and left, he would click his heels. It was a cultural experience. But my father stood up to give that gentleman a green card and to be there, not just as an American, but as a proud Jew, because we don't punish the children for their father's sins. It was the Christian thing to do, actually. Later, my father helped get a green card for Peter Malkin. Peter Malkin was part of the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. They went into South America and they found Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann was the mastermind of the final solution. He wrote a book called Eichmann in My Hands. He was literally the gentleman who got Adolf Eichmann in his hands, brought him back to Israel, where he stood trial and then was convicted in the Democratic court. Imagine the dignity that he was given before his death wasn't what he afforded other people. My father got Peter Malkin his green card in the United States. When I grew up in my synagogue, there would be a group of older men, and I would sit with them in the back of my synagogue, or I'd go by, and they all wore short sleeves, and you could see numbers embroiled on their arms. Numbers. This generation is getting older. Those numbers are fading, and it's going to be up to us to carry the torch forward. When I left law school, I wanted to be a federal prosecutor, and I deported, and I worked to help protect the United States from bad guys. But I actually went to the Office of Special Investigations in Washington, and I got an interview, and I almost accepted a job to be one of the prosecutors in the Nazi war criminals. It was in the 1990s. The criminals now, if they exist, were in the 80s and 90s. There is no statute of limitation on justice. You have to well imagine what the slaughtering of millions of people did, not just for Jews, but for the world. If you look at the Jewish state, the state of Israel, all the scholarship, the patents, every cell phone that you have, there's technology that came out of the state of Israel. The contributions, the Nobel Peace Prizes of physicists, doctors, lawyers, and so forth. Can you imagine the lost culture that we had in that generation? I'm so proud that our governor at the time mandated this, and it's also mandated in Poland that every child visit Auschwitz. They can't graduate unless they visit the site. And it's a surreal experience. You see these magnificent trees juxtapose a camp of death. The stories are horrifying, the experience more personal than you want. But when it comes to these major atrocities and these times, it's so important that we act in vigilance and in friendship. We see Iran, Syria, and the terrorists in the Middle East that are lobbing kites and rockets into civilian territory to make their claims. We saw in 1976, when Jews were kidnapped on an airplane and taken to Entebbe, Uganda, how Israel masterminded a magnificent return of these individuals. The current president, the prime minister actually of the state of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, his brother, was killed in that effort. They actually dressed up as the dictator and drove in an entourage, and were able to then get all of the hostages back and return them to the state of Israel. We have a military army in the state of Israel where if there are Jews in jeopardy or people in need, there was an earthquake in Haiti and the Israeli government sent a contingency. In Turkey, there are countries that they don't get along with, but they'll allow them in. And there are Arabs that I represent that need medical assistance, and we work as Jews to bring them into the United States to help them to go to Israel and so forth. The state of Israel, thank God, is in many ways invincible now, politically, with great friendships, with Arab countries, but it's so important that we act in friendship and in America's interest to make sure that we're there for one another, because at its soul is inscribed the memory of the Holocaust. And if you look back even further in your rearview mirror, the Spanish Inquisition of 1492, the pogroms that were laden upon the Jewish community in the millennia, remind us that these lessons of history can be returned to our front pages. And when you read about synagogues where there are mass shootings or people walking in with guns, you can well imagine what that does to people. I have the privilege of being a mayor of a city, representing Jews, non-Jews, and I have to tell you that the Holocaust impacts everybody. Slavery, the Holocaust, the Japanese internments. Dr. King taught us how to look forward and raise a sense of excellence. Your teachers have imparted so much information to you. Your parents, who love you dearly, would hope that you would take a position one day, not at a city hall, a state house, or Congress, but take a position in a shopping market if somebody says something derogatory against somebody else. If you allow intolerance, it vests itself, it roots itself, and we can't allow that in this beautiful country. Let people express themselves and show respect to somebody who disagrees with you, but make sure that you pay the lessons forward. My mom's not with me anymore. She has 2 girls in our family named after her. And every Saturday we go to synagogue, and she's in my heart. I'm grateful that God spared my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. We were the lucky ones. Reach out. The love, the image that we were made in is a godly one. Not one person in any station in life deserves better treatment. We all have the same red blood, and we all deserve the same love. And I'm here as a friend, as a neighboring mayor, to just give you a few lessons of life, and to hope that you, when you are in your position, will pay forward and take a microphone and stand up against an intolerance. The one that we memorialize today is unimaginable, but it happened. To deny it and not face history's lessons would be worse than what happened. Thank you. I'd like to take some questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Don't be shy. Yes.
Do you see any analogies between what's happening today in the country and what could lead to, God forbid, something as horrible as the Holocaust? Maybe not to that extent, but some of the events, again, that should concern all of our students that's happening today.
So words matter. I actually have the privilege of being the First Lady's immigration lawyer. Mrs. Trump is a client. We got citizenship for her parents about a year ago, and her sister's immigration matters I handle, and I've represented the president's immigration matters for a very long time. Trump models, Miss Universe, so forth. Language matters. He would call his parents, his in-laws, getting citizenship, chain migration. I would call it family reunification. There's a bedrock principle in immigration law that we want to unify families. Why would you want to bring a family together? What's the benefit of having a family together? Family's good. Why is family good? Because You have somebody to love, and you have somebody who's going to love you, right? Why else is it good to have family? Anybody? Huh? Somebody, come on. What else does family do?
Because it's like the only, stay by your side.
Yeah, they're loyal.
Yeah.
And when they stay by your side, as you so eloquently stated, they're going to encourage you to do the right thing. They're going to help you find a job. If you're not feeling well, they'll help you get to a doctor. Well, actually, that's what Mrs. Trump told me. I want to make sure that my parents are citizens so that if I travel and I do the country's work, I know that I have good babysitting services, and I know I can rely on the loyalty of my family. The president would have us believe that somebody would use immigration in order to bring in relatives, distant relatives that would want to cause us harm. That's not what the president intended. That's not what the president intended. And the truth is, language matters. So to answer your question, Principal, honestly, it starts with the language. It sets the tone. When you don't give the microphone to people that you don't agree with, when you belittle them, you try to kick them out, you try to then not see them, marginalize them, and it starts a slippery slope, then it's okay. There was a disgusting cartoon in the New York Times a few weeks ago. It was the head of the dog was the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and it was President Trump with a yarmulke on holding the dog. That's how it started in the 1930s, with cartoons of Jews with big noses and long hair and yarmulkes. Shame on the New York Times for making a political point or not catching the bias and the prejudice of somebody in their own place. Shame on members of Congress talking about the Jews with the Benjamins. I feel vulnerable as a Democrat that the crazies have now hijacked the policy and the agenda of the Democratic Party. Generally, you govern in the middle of the country. The longest and the deepest and the finest late-night TV show hosts we have literally were born in the heartbelt of the nation. There's a more liberal politic in California and New York. There's a more conservative approach in the middle. And the president gets elected and governs in the middle. But right now, it looks like on both sides of the aisle, we have extremes. So to answer your concern, the language is going. People do not have the patience to withstand scrutiny, so good people don't get involved in public service, and a slippery slope evolves. In some households, they won't eat on German dishes. They won't drive German cars. Germany, to its credit, stepped up, has memorials, has museums, paid reparations, and tried to do what it could in the generation that followed while the world split it to make sure that it wouldn't recoup itself and get to a third war against the world. But things are changing. And I'm shocked myself in my own community, the things that are said. And even with social media, bad information can file and flow fast as well. So a lie can root itself and turn people against the culture or people just as easily as it can go forward. So I am concerned, and it's really on you guys because you're going to inherit this responsibility. Yes?
For us as students, what do you think we do in history for repeating itself?
For you as students, what can you do to make sure that history does not repeat itself? What do you want to do? What are you interested in studying? Engineering. I think Dr. King coined it well. He said, if you're a street sweeper, sweep the streets like Michelangelo. If you're an engineer and I'm a lawyer, be the best that you can do, the sense of excellence that he had, and make sure in your space you won't allow that conduct to happen. Whether you're walking into a store, sitting at a dinner table, or going into your schools, there is poison on the campuses of the United States colleges. being spewed by students that capture the microphones and try to change the agenda. Professors that can't be heard and their work not appreciated, that are trying to inculcate bad things. Stop when you see something. You know that advertisement in New York, when you see something, say something? Do it. I've never used the N-word. I've never disrespected somebody publicly. I don't allow my children to say certain things. And in my house, if somebody says something that alludes to something anti-gay, I cut it right down, right there. It's a slippery slope. When you lessen, when you liberalize or you let loose a little bit, you're allowing the person to ferment more. I've had to have words, and I've parted ways with political allies and friends who just have bias. They're slang words. Now, you wouldn't blame people who are Holocaust survivors for having a bias against Germans, would you? Or non-Jews, maybe, because of the way they were felt. It's so much harder. I couldn't imagine the rabbis who were babies and raised in concentration camps, who are now teaching Bible and the Torah studies in another generation. How did they have that kind of faith when they saw the slaughtering of their parents? But they doubled down into their space. It's a beautiful question. Own your space. Set a very high standard. And make sure that you do not allow anybody around you. Marry right, work for the right people, and if you see some prejudice, say something, because that's the beginning of a very dangerous slope. Yes, sir?
Do you think that radical anti-Semitism is
Do I think radical anti-Semitism is?
still happening? Maybe not as in a bigger scale as
So,
before.
You use the word radical anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is happening. Radical, if you're talking about the alt-right and neo-Nazis, it's here. It's close. All the synagogues in Bergen County are now embracing an organization called CSS, which is a group of young volunteers from each synagogue that are learning Krav Maga, karate, and self-defense, self-protection. I took a contingency of this group to London, where they have a group called CST, which runs itself with millions of dollars and has 4,000 volunteers. We're not going to leave it, is what the Jewish community says to the local police. We're going to protect ourselves. So the answer to your question is, anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is flourishing, and radical anti-Semitism has rooted itself. There are people that still follow Adolf Hitler, and they live not too far from the state of New Jersey and in the state of New Jersey. And they're well known and they're being tracked by the FBI, but they can't be everywhere. In my city, in Englewood, they had to expel a child in a private school because of anti-black and anti-Jewish remarks that were put on a wall in the bathroom. They had to convene the whole school, as Dwight England. They had to convene the whole school, and they had to have tough conversations. It's a remarkable experience. In Entebbe, when they hijacked the airplane, they asked all the Jews to come forward. And much to the credit of those that were there, a lot of the Christian priests and real sincere people stepped up and said, I'm a Jew too. How many of you would do that? How many of you would step up if you weren't the target of something? Well, young boys, young girls, let me just say this. They'll come for somebody, and eventually they're going to come for you. The enfranchisement of the Korean American community in Palisades Park, New Jersey, is a gift to the Jewish community, the Latino community, the African American community. I came here as if I was being sworn in when Chris was going to become mayor in this chamber, in this room. I was so proud. Do you feel that love for somebody, or do you feel competitiveness? When you see somebody going through something, how do you feel? I'm an EMT in New York. I'm with a Jewish volunteer ambulance group. It's called Hatzalah in Hebrew. Hatzalah means to save. We have about 95 ambulances. I see we have an airplane now, helicopter. And we have a 3-minute response time. We have 4 children. For 27 years, I've been a member of this EMT group. I recertify every 3 years. Lights and sirens in my car outside with an O2 kit, oxygen, and I go on medical calls for complete strangers. I want my kids to see what their father does, not what he says. I need to be reminded every day that the blessings that I have are so much more magnificent than the challenges other people have, and I have to take stock in that. I delivered 2 children, not my own. I've been in all sorts of medical emergent circumstances for complete strangers. It's so important that you do a deep dive into your own mindset. Are you really happy when somebody different succeeds? And will that make America stronger? And what does that do for your community, your business, your family? I'm so happy. I teach 2 classes now in a law school when I see students coming into law school because they want to leave as immigration lawyers. That is a fascinating experience. You need to do a deep dive into your own space to prevent anti-Semitism. You have to recognize that anti-Semitism is just as bad as anti-Asian, anti-black, and so forth. And if you tolerate it, it's going to spread. It's like a cancer. It's got to be cut out fast. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
How come nobody's talking about the concentration camps in China?
How come nobody's talking about the concentration camps where?
In China.
In China.
Yeah, think about it.
So the world has turned its attention through social media to parts of the world that it never would have imagined. And the lessons of the Holocaust are when you force people into camps or internments, you need to act swiftly. In China, in Darfur, anywhere, I am so proud to see the leadership of the Jewish community internationally stepping up when it comes to atrocities and challenges against humanity. So whatever is happening needs to be brought to the public light. As an asylum lawyer, I can tell you that cases are handled very well. America has a robust system. Our president would want to have you wait in a home country that's persecuting you before you would come here. That's not the lessons of history or the United States. But thank God for the internet. That's all I can tell you. Expose it, bring it out, so that it would be prevented. Yes, sir? Is the U.S. ever going to? So, is the U.S. ever going to get involved in China? Listen, the lessons of history and our president aside show us that we follow as the moral compass the world's challenges. I think it's foolish not to engage ourselves in that region. If Israel can barter treaties with Egypt and develop relationships with Saudi Arabia and effectively master its own when the whole world, 14 countries wanted to decimate it, now respects it enough to leave it alone, the United States has to take those lessons and do a deep dive. I just don't know how sophisticated the foreign counsel to the president is being given, because it seems everything that's being done is being done for political and visual gain and not substantive gain. Amy and I had a chance yesterday to meet with Senator Coons from Delaware, who was visiting a home in Closter, New Jersey. It's, believe it or not, in the hands of 100 U.S. senators, 100 men and women, to ratify treaties, to deal with challenges such as China and our members of Congress in concert with the president. I'm prayerful that they're going to do the right thing. There should be no blind spot in America's public relations or our national security interests and our business interests are so embroiled in that. The lessons of the Holocaust in that region is to cast a light. What happens, ladies and gentlemen, when you cast a light? The roaches, they run to the corners. people end up doing the right thing, and we get a good snapshot of what's happening. Yes?
Sorry. Do you think the Holocaust would go like differently so than Red Might Come?
I'm sorry, do I think?
Is there any way that the whole genocide would have gone differently if somebody of power recognized Red Might Come?
Had somebody in that age read Mein Kampf, would they have done something differently? Mein Kampf was a book that Hitler authored. Mein Kampf was translated into so many languages, and despite not having the internet, was available to host governments, including the United States. Reading it didn't mean that they were going to act. Unfortunately, nobody wanted the Jews, and everybody turned a blind eye, and nobody would believe the inhumanity of this. Can you imagine the soldiers that were told to enforce this? Soldiers who went to Jewish doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, store owners, who were then given the enfranchisement of I'm better than you because I'm Aryan and you're a Jew. I think despite your question, the fact is there was ample notification that this was happening and could have been prevented if the world was more attuned. You guys are at a different vantage point than the students were in Europe. And with, again, social media and the exposure and the right lessons of life, despite people putting venom and poison on paper, it wouldn't have happened. They just didn't want it. They just didn't stop it. Yeah? Is there a question? Yes, I'm sorry. No, I get that.
It is very, very important. And I know that most of the people in the Holocaust, but other things are also very important. We need to write the
Okay, so the question is, why aren't the other atrocities in Darfur, in Armenia, and so forth talked about with the same kind of robustness and zeal? I happen to believe that it has to do with the faith that I grew up in, and the kind of national ethos that this takes. When people in the Jewish faith learn something, the first thing they do is to bring it to their children, much like the Asian culture, the Korean community, and so forth. There is, thank God, a tremendous reverence for age, for children, for education. And people are taught, as in my household too, we make our money in order to pay tuition. We make information in order to provide it to others, and we try to make things better for ourselves and for the next generation. There are some communities that don't have the financial capacity to do that, and there are just some communities that just are so upset over the victimization, they don't want to share it publicly. There will be a Holocaust survivor speaking, I think, in the Palisades Park Library tomorrow, right? There are people that can't bring themselves to talk about it anymore. God bless Steven Spielberg, the famous film director, for an extraordinary initiative that he did in actually running films and working to memorialize the Schindler's List and all the scores of interviews that have been done. Amy's uncle, who survived, was it Auschwitz or Buchenwald, actually did a beautiful video, because that generation won't be here with us. So I'm pleased that the Jewish community steps up, marches, walks, and calls attention to the world's challenges because of what we went through. And I know you didn't mean to make it sound like the Holocaust gets too much attention and the other ones aren't as good. But I think as Americans, any one of these things is an abomination and an atrocity. And if we believe in our own veins that this could happen to us, and that an atrocity against any innocent in the world is an affront to us and our humanity, then it'll get more attention. So it's up to the United Nations, and one of the greatest disappointments that I have is the politics in the United Nations. That they continually castigate the state of Israel despite its history, its legacy for 2,000 plus years. That they don't call attention to these atrocities and use the lessons of the Holocaust to call the world's attention, and they fluff it over because they have other things in mind. I've handled a lot of defectors and whistleblowers at the UN and ambassadors that were scared to go back to their home countries because they saw America's golden doors open to them. I think the UN has a lot of blood on its hands when it comes to not helping and curing these things as quickly as they could. The bottom line is you got to make sure if you're going to run for office or put people forward, you're putting people forward that get history, that read, not watch, but read, and have a beautiful heart that sees no color, no difference, and clarity of what our founding mothers and fathers had for this country. This beautiful experiment we call America works because it embraces diversity and because something like this ought never happened here. The fact that we're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism is just upsetting with the history behind us. Yes?
Why do you think it was so easy for Hitler to rise
One second. Why was it so easy for Hitler to rise to power? Because people didn't stop him. Because people didn't ask questions, people didn't hold him accountable, because he fooled them, just as we're being fooled by leaders throughout the world that do not do what's right by their communities as well. I'm hoping in the age of social media that you'll put your own opinion on things and you'll develop your own politic. I wish you all much success and love, and thank you. If you want to come by and just see this.